You know how everyone talks about love conquering all? Yeah, well, that's complete bullshit. I'm Vicky, I'm 28, and I just learned the hard way that unconditional love has some pretty steep conditions attached. Let me tell you exactly how I went from having the perfect relationship to watching my ex-boyfriend marry my sister's friend while I'm sitting here alone, wondering what the hell happened. Gavin and I were together for 5 years. 5 whole years of what I thought was real love, the kind where you know each other inside and out, where you've been through everything together and come out stronger. We met when I was 23 and he was 25, and it was one of those instant connection things where conversation flowed easily and we just got each other's humor and quirks. The guy was obsessed with fitness from day one. He'd wake up at 5 a.m. to hit the gym, meal prep on Sundays like it was a religion, and actually enjoyed running, which I thought was psychotic but also kind of attractive. Having a boyfriend who looked good shirtless and could carry me up 3 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat definitely had its perks. I'd go to the gym with him sometimes in the beginning, not because I loved it, but because I loved watching him get all focused and intense. We were solid, really solid. The kind of couple other people envied, because we never seemed to fight about stupid stuff like most couples do. Our friends would always comment on how natural we seemed together, how we balanced each other out. When we decided to move in together after 4 years, it felt like the most obvious next step in the world. That apartment hunting process was actually fun. We'd joke about our future together, debate where to put furniture, argue over paint colors in that playful way couples do. When we found our place, a decent 2-bedroom with space for his home gym setup, it felt like we were officially real adults with a real relationship heading somewhere permanent. Moving in together was everything I'd imagined. We fell into this comfortable routine where he'd make coffee while I got ready for work. We'd text throughout the day about random stuff, and evenings were just easy. We'd cook dinner together, binge Netflix shows, talk about our days. It was domestic bliss, honestly. But here's where I started fucking everything up, though I didn't realize it at the time. When you live with someone, you stop feeling like you have to impress them anymore. They've already chosen you, right? They've seen you without makeup. They know you leave dishes in the sink sometimes. They've heard you fart. All the real stuff that comes with actually sharing a life. About 6 months after we moved in, I hurt my back at work. Nothing dramatic, just lifted something wrong and tweaked it. The doctor said to take it easy for a few weeks, avoid heavy lifting, maybe skip the gym until it healed. Gavin was incredibly supportive, bringing me ice packs, helping me with everything, being the perfect boyfriend. Those few weeks turned into months. My back was still sore, and honestly, I'd gotten used to sleeping in instead of dragging myself to the gym at 6 a.m. It was nice not having to worry about workout clothes or protein shakes or any of that stuff. I figured Gavin loved me for me, not for my body, so what was the big deal if I took a break from all the fitness obsession? That's when the eating started. Not binge eating or anything crazy, just different eating. When you're not working out, you don't think about what you're putting in your body the same way. I'd order pizza instead of making the grilled chicken and vegetables we usually had. I'd grab fast food for lunch instead of packing salads. Ice cream after dinner became a regular thing instead of an occasional treat. Gavin never said anything. He'd eat whatever I made or ordered, never complained, never made me feel bad about it. I took that as proof that he loved me unconditionally, that he didn't care about superficial stuff like weight or appearance. When I'd catch him looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, I told myself he was just thinking about how lucky he was to have someone comfortable enough to be real with him. The weight came on gradually at first, then faster. By the time I really noticed, I'd gained about 40 pounds. My clothes were tight, I was buying bigger sizes, but I rationalized it. My back was still bothering me, I was stressed at work. These things happen. Gavin still told me I was beautiful, still kissed me goodbye every morning, still held my hand when we watched TV. By month 8 of living together, I'd gained about 70 pounds. That's when I started noticing changes in how Gavin looked at me, or maybe how he didn't look at me. He'd still say the right things, still be affectionate, but something felt different. The way he touched me was more careful, less spontaneous. When I'd walk around in just underwear like I used to, he'd smile but then find something else to focus on. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. This is what happens in long-term relationships. The initial passion settles into something deeper and more meaningful. We were past the superficial stage where everything was about physical attraction. We had real love now, the kind that lasts. But the gym thing started bothering me. Every morning, there he was, getting up early, staying consistent with his routine, coming home energized and happy. It felt like judgment on my choices, even though he never said anything. When he'd ask if I wanted to come with him, I'd make excuses about my back or being tired. Eventually, he stopped asking. By the 1-year mark of living together, I'd gained right around 100 pounds. 100 fucking pounds. I'd barely recognized myself in photos, and I'd started avoiding mirrors except when absolutely necessary. But Gavin still said he loved me. He still came home to me every day. He still introduced me as his girlfriend and acted proud to be with me in public. I figured if he really had a problem with it, he'd say something, right? Men aren't exactly known for keeping their opinions to themselves. Since he didn't bring it up, I assumed everything was fine. More than fine. I assumed he was one of those rare guys who actually loved a woman for her mind and personality, not just her body. Looking back now, I think that was my biggest mistake. I took his kindness for acceptance, his patience for approval. I thought I'd won the boyfriend lottery, a guy who'd love me no matter what I looked like. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly killing the physical attraction that brought us together in the first place, and expecting him to just deal with it because real love meant accepting everything without question. The thing is, I felt entitled to that acceptance. After 5 years together, after moving in together, after building this life together, I felt like I'd earned the right to let myself go a little. I'd proven I was more than just a pretty face. So why should I have to keep performing prettiness for him? He knew who I really was by then. Wasn't that enough? I started getting annoyed when he'd suggest we cook healthier meals together or go for walks after dinner. It felt like he was trying to change me, like he wasn't satisfied with who I'd become. When he'd make casual comments about other women's appearances, just normal observations about actresses or women we'd see out, I'd get this sick feeling in my stomach. Was he comparing me to them? Was he wishing I looked different? But I never said any of that out loud. Instead, I'd make little comments about how shallow it was to care so much about appearance, how real relationships were built on deeper connections. I'd praise him for being different from other guys who only cared about looks. I was basically training him to never bring up my weight gain, convincing both of us that mentioning it would make him a bad person. The irony is that I thought I was being mature about it. I thought I was showing him what real, unconditional love looked like by accepting myself as I was and expecting him to do the same. I had no idea I was setting us both up for complete disaster. The first time I really noticed something was wrong with our physical relationship was on a random Tuesday night in February. We were watching some Netflix show, and I was in the mood, so I started kissing his neck the way I used to. He responded at first, but when things started getting more heated, I could feel this hesitation in his body that hadn't been there before. We ended up having sex, but it was different. Awkward in ways it had never been awkward. Positions that used to work didn't work anymore. I was out of breath faster. My body felt cumbersome in ways that made me self-conscious. But the worst part was feeling like he was going through the motions, like he was doing it because he thought he should, not because he couldn't keep his hands off me. Over the next few months, our sex life went from frequent to practically non-existent. We went from having sex maybe 4 or 5 times a week to 2 or 3 times a week to maybe twice a week. And when we did have sex, it was becoming more predictable, less spontaneous, less passionate. The positions we could comfortably do had definitely decreased. Things that used to be effortless required more coordination now, more work on his part. I could tell he was trying not to make it obvious, but I wasn't stupid. When someone has to do 90% of the physical work during sex, both people notice. I started feeling self-conscious about my body in ways I never had before. I'd insist on having sex with the lights off, or I'd keep a shirt on, or I'd position myself so he couldn't see certain angles. The spontaneous, comfortable intimacy we used to have was being replaced by this calculated choreography, where I was constantly thinking about how I looked instead of how I felt. But here's what really started pissing me off. He never complained. Not once. He never made me feel bad about any of it. Never suggested we try to work on it together. Never even acknowledged that anything had changed. He'd still initiate sometimes. He'd still tell me I was beautiful. He'd still seem satisfied afterward. At first, I appreciated that. I thought it showed what a good guy he was, how much he respected me. But after a while, it started feeling patronizing, like he was humoring me, like he was being careful with my feelings instead of being honest with me. By late summer, we were having sex maybe 15 times in 6 months. 15 times. I kept track because I couldn't believe how low the number was getting. We'd gone from being one of those couples who couldn't keep their hands off each other to practically roommates who occasionally had awkward, obligatory sex. I started feeling angry about his silence. If he had a problem with how I looked, why didn't he just say so? If he wanted me to lose weight, why was he being so passive-aggressive about it? His refusal to address it directly felt dishonest, like he was making me guess what he was thinking, instead of just being straight with me. That anger started leaking into other parts of our relationship. I'd make snide comments about people who were obsessed with working out. I'd roll my eyes when he'd talk about his fitness goals. I'd order the most indulgent food possible when we went out to eat, almost daring him to say something about it. That's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. Instead of talking to him about what I was feeling, instead of addressing the real issues in our relationship, I decided to talk to my sister about it instead. Raven is 3 years younger than me, but she's always been the one with more dating experience, more confidence with guys. When I called her one evening after another disappointing attempt at intimacy with Gavin, it felt natural to ask for her advice. "I think there's something wrong with Gavin," I told her, sitting in my car outside our apartment because I didn't want him to overhear. "Like, sexually. We barely have sex anymore." Raven was immediately interested. "What do you mean barely? Like how often are we talking?" I felt embarrassed even saying it. "Maybe once every 2 weeks, sometimes less. And when we do, it's like he's not even into it." I started calling her regularly to complain about our relationship. It felt good to have someone to vent to, someone who would agree that Gavin was being weird and distant. But the more I talked to Raven about it, the more detailed our conversations became. I started telling her things I probably shouldn't have told anyone. Specific things about our sex life, intimate details about Gavin, private moments that should have stayed between us. Somewhere along the way, these conversations stopped being about getting advice and started being about trashing Gavin. I was painting him as this selfish, shallow guy who didn't appreciate what he had, and Raven was eating it up. Then she started making comments to Gavin directly. The first time it happened, we were all hanging out at our apartment. Raven had come over for dinner and ended up staying late. During a lull in conversation, she suddenly looked at Gavin and said, "You know, Vicky was telling me you guys don't have sex very often. That's so weird to me." I felt my face turn red. Gavin looked mortified. Instead of shutting it down, instead of telling my sister that our private life was none of her business, I just sat there. Part of me was embarrassed, but part of me was glad someone was finally calling him out. After that, Raven started making these comments regularly. She'd joke about Gavin being a monk, or tease him about his low sex drive, or make pointed comments about how much more active other couples were. And every time, I'd either laugh along or stay silent. I told myself I was just letting her be herself, but the truth is, I liked seeing Gavin squirm a little. I liked having someone else point out what I saw as his failures. The comments got more frequent and more pointed. She'd ask Gavin directly about our sex life, would make jokes about him not being able to keep up with me, would suggest that maybe he needed to see a doctor. She'd do it with a smile, like it was all playful teasing, but everyone could feel the edge underneath. That's when Mia entered the picture. She was one of Raven's friends from her yoga studio, and she kept showing up to hang out at our place. From the first time I saw her interact with Gavin, I should have known I was in trouble. She was everything I used to be before I gained the weight. About a size 6, toned but not overly muscular, naturally pretty. But more than that, she had this energy that I recognized because I used to have it too. She was interested in things, curious about the world. She'd ask Gavin about his work, about his workouts, about articles he'd read. She'd engage with him in conversations that went beyond small talk, the kind of conversations I used to have with him before I got caught up in being annoyed about everything. Watching them interact was like watching a preview of what my relationship with Gavin could have been if I'd made different choices. If I'd stayed engaged with his interests instead of resenting them. If I'd worked on myself instead of expecting him to just accept whatever version of me I became. But instead of recognizing that, I got defensive and territorial. I started making pointed comments whenever Mia was around. Little digs about people who had too much time for hobbies or who were obsessed with being healthy. I'd roll my eyes when she'd mention some yoga class or hiking trip. The worst part was that I could see Gavin getting embarrassed by my comments. He'd try to smooth things over, or change the subject, or find ways to redirect conversations away from topics that might set me off. He was managing my mood around Mia the same way he'd started managing my mood around everything else. By November, I was in full defensive mode every time Mia was around. I'd find reasons to interrupt their conversations, or to steer discussions toward topics I knew more about, or to make comments that reminded everyone that I was Gavin's girlfriend and had been for 5 years. But the more possessive I got, the more I could see Gavin pulling away from me. Not toward Mia necessarily, but just away. Away from the drama, away from the tension, away from the person I was becoming. The explosion happened on a Tuesday night in December. I'd been having a particularly bad day, and when I got home, Gavin was making one of his healthy dinner recipes. I ordered pizza, I announced, even though I could see he'd already started cooking. He looked confused. Oh, I was making dinner for us. Well, I wanted pizza. You can eat your health food if you want. After dinner, I was still feeling combative, so I called Raven. I needed someone to validate my frustration, to agree that Gavin was being difficult. He's being so weird about eating lately, I complained, not bothering to lower my voice even though Gavin was in the next room. Like, God forbid I want pizza for dinner. That's when I crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed. Maybe that's why our sex life is so terrible, I said, loud enough that I knew Gavin could hear me. He's so focused on his perfect body that he can't handle being with someone who's not obsessed with the gym. I heard the TV click off. I mean, we barely have sex anymore, I continued. Maybe once every couple weeks, and even then, it's like he's doing me a favor. It's pathetic. That's when Gavin appeared in the doorway. His face was completely neutral, but there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. I'm going to take a walk, he said quietly, and left. He didn't come back for 2 hours. The next morning, he was polite but distant. Not angry distant, just gone. Like he'd checked out emotionally overnight. Over the next few days, I kept waiting for him to bring up what I'd said, but he never did. Instead, he just started pulling away. Not dramatically, but the emotional connection was gone. He stopped trying to include me in his plans, stopped sharing details about his day, stopped initiating any kind of physical contact. By January, we were basically strangers living in the same space. I began to panic. This wasn't what I'd wanted when I'd complained to Raven about our relationship. I'd wanted him to fight for us, to acknowledge the problems and work on fixing them. I hadn't wanted him to just give up. The end came in March. We had the most honest conversation we'd had in over a year, where he told me how it felt to have our private life discussed with Raven, how disconnected he'd felt from me for months. I told him how rejected I felt, how scared I was that he didn't love me anymore. But then he said, I think we both know this isn't working anymore. We're not good for each other like this. Maybe we should take a break. A break. Everyone knows what that means. I begged him not to do this, promised I could change, could lose the weight, could stop talking to Raven about us. But it was too late. By that weekend, he was gone. 3 months later, I found out through Facebook that he was dating Mia. I saw the photos of them at some outdoor festival, looking happy and natural together. Gavin looked like himself again, like the person he'd been when we first got together. I called Raven, hysterical. "Did you know about this? Did you know your friend was fucking my boyfriend? Vicky, you and Gavin broke up 3 months ago. He's allowed to date other people." But I was furious, not just because he was with someone else, but because he was with her. The girl I'd felt threatened by for months. Over the next year, I became obsessed with monitoring their relationship through social media. They looked perfect together. They'd gone hiking, cooked dinner together, been to art gallery openings. In every photo, they looked like they belonged together. My weight continued to climb. I'd gained another 30 pounds, bringing my total to around 130 pounds from where I'd started. Dating was a nightmare. The few guys who showed interest would disappear after meeting me, or they'd clearly be settling. Meanwhile, Gavin and Mia moved in together after 6 months. They traveled together, worked out together, built the kind of active, healthy lifestyle that I'd given up on. By the end of that first year, I was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths. Gavin hadn't left me because he was shallow. He'd left me because I'd become someone who made him miserable. Mia hadn't stolen him. She'd simply been the kind of person who reminded him what it felt like to be appreciated by a partner. I'd destroyed my own relationship through my choices, gaining weight without caring about the impact, complaining about him instead of addressing problems directly, becoming resentful instead of working to improve things, taking him for granted while expecting him to accept whatever I became. But acknowledging those truths didn't make me want to change. It just made me angrier at everyone else. 2 years later, I'm still single, still angry, and somehow convinced that everyone else is the problem. I'm 30 now, living in the same apartment, working the same job. I'd carrying around 140 pounds more than when Gavin and I first got together. Gavin and Mia got engaged last month. I saw the announcement on Facebook and stared at it for an hour, feeling rage and self-pity and something that might have been regret. That should have been me. That should have been my engagement, my future with the man I'd spent 5 years with. But instead, I'm watching from the sidelines while someone else gets the happy ending I threw away. I tell myself I'm happier alone, that I don't need a man to validate my worth, that anyone who can't love me at my size isn't worth having. But the truth is, I'm miserable. I'm lonely and bitter and so deep in my own bullshit that I can't see how I got here. The universe gave me everything I thought I wanted. A man who loved me, who supported me, who tried to work with me instead of against me. And I systematically destroyed it because I thought love meant never having to try, never having to grow, never having to consider how my choices affected the person who was supposed to matter most. But I learned nothing from losing it. I'm still the same person who drove Gavin away, just older and more bitter and more convinced that the world owes me something I'm not willing to work for. And honestly, I probably always will be.